The stars looked different from the bridge of the Vraxian battleship Silent Thunder. Commander Tae-ho had been patrolling this sector for 12 years, and the view never changed. Dead space, empty worlds, nothing but the slow dance of planets around their dying sun. This was the Forbidden Zone, the place where no ship was allowed to go, the place where the old stories said monsters once lived. Tae-ho stretched his forearms and checked the scanner displays. All quiet. The same readings he had seen every day for years. No ships, no signals, no life. Just the way the Galactic Coalition wanted it. The bridge crew worked in silence. Most of them were young Vraxians who had never seen real combat. They did not understand why they spent months at a time watching empty space. They did not know the old stories. They did not remember why this place was forbidden. But Tae-ho remembered. His grandfather had told him the stories when he was just a small Vraxian with barely developed arms. Stories about the violent species that once lived in this system. Stories about creatures called humans. "Commander," called out Navigator Yexmo from his station, "I'm getting some strange readings from the third planet." Tae-ho moved to the navigation console. The third planet was the one the old records called Earth. It was supposed to be dead, burned clean 500,000 years ago. Nothing should be there. "What kind of readings?" Tae-ho asked. Yexmo pointed at his screen. "Energy signatures, very faint. Could be natural geological activity." "On a dead world?" Tae-ho studied the data. The readings were small, but they were definitely there. "When did these start?" "About an hour ago, sir. They're getting stronger." Tae-ho felt a chill run through his body. His grandfather's stories came back to him. Stories about humans who refused to die. Stories about creatures that came back from the dead to hunt their enemies. "Send a message to Coalition Command," Tae-ho ordered. "Tell them we have unusual activity in the Forbidden Zone." The communication officer, a young Vraxian named Dexka, nodded and began transmitting. But before he could finish, alarms started ringing throughout the ship. "Commander!" Yexmo shouted. "New contacts. Multiple. Ships emerging from the dark side of the third planet." Tae-ho rushed back to his command chair. On the main screen he could see them. Ships unlike anything he had ever seen before. They were huge and dark, moving in perfect formation. Their design was smooth and organic, like they had been grown, instead of built. "How many?" Tae-ho asked. 12. "No, 20. Sir, I'm counting over 50 ships now. They're still coming." The ships moved toward them with impossible speed. No engines that Tae-ho knew could move vessels that large so quickly. As they got closer, he could see details that made his blood run cold. The ships were covered in symbols, not the clean geometric patterns that coalition races used, but rough, angular marks that looked like they had been carved by hand. They looked primitive and savage, but the ships themselves were clearly advanced beyond anything the coalition possessed. "Sir," Dexka called out, "I'm receiving a transmission. It's in the old human language." Tae-ho had studied the ancient human language as part of his military education. All coalition officers learned about their enemies, even extinct ones. "Put it through." A voice filled the bridge. It spoke in the harsh, guttural sounds of ancient human speech. But there was something wrong with it. The voice was too deep, too resonant. It did not sound like it came from any throat that should exist. "Coalition vessel," the voice said. "You are in human space. Leave now or be destroyed." The bridge crew looked at each other in confusion. Humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. The coalition had made sure of it 500,000 years ago. "This is Commander Tae-ho of the Vraxian fleet," he replied in human language. "Humans are extinct. Identify yourself." The response came immediately. "Humans are not extinct, Vraxian. We are very much alive, and we remember everything." On the screen, one of the human ships separated from the group and moved toward them. As it got closer, Tae-ho could see its true size. The Silent Thunder was a battleship, one of the largest vessels in the Vraxian fleet. This human ship was 10 times bigger. "Sir," Yexmo whispered. "Their weapons are powering up." Tae-ho looked at his tactical display. Energy readings from the Human ship were off the scale. Whatever weapons they carried, they were far beyond Coalition technology. Vraxian Commander, the human voice continued. Your people participated in the genocide of our species. Your fleets helped hunt us from our homes. Your leaders signed the death warrant for billions of human children. That was 500,000 years ago, Tejo replied. Those people are long dead. I had nothing to do with it. But you benefit from it, the voice said. You live in space that was once ours. You breathe air that human lungs should have breathed. You exist because we were destroyed. The human ship was now close enough that Tejo could see details of its hull. The metal looked wrong somehow. It seemed to shift and move like it was alive. And those symbols carved into its surface were glowing with a cold blue light. We do not seek war with your people, Tejo said, though his hand was already moving toward the weapons console. War? The human voice almost sounded amused. Commander, the war ended 500,000 years ago. You won. You killed us all and took our worlds. The human ship stopped moving. It hung in space like a predator watching its prey. But we did not stay dead. The voice continued. We survived. We grew. We learned. And now we have returned. What do you want? Tejo asked. Justice. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Tejo had heard that word before in the old stories. Humans were obsessed with justice. It was one of the reasons the Coalition had decided to destroy them. The Coalition will never surrender to a dead species, Tejo said. The Coalition will surrender to us, the human voice replied. Because we are no longer the weak creatures. You remember, we are something new, something you helped create with your cruelty. On his scanner, Tejo could see more ships appearing, hundreds of them. They emerged from behind moons and asteroids like they had been hiding there for years, waiting. This is your only warning, Commander Tejo, the human voice said. Return to your masters. Tell them that Earth's children have come home. Tell them that the dead world is dead no longer. The human ships began to move away, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as they had appeared. But Tejo knew they were still there, watching, waiting. He turned to his communication officer. Dexka, send a priority message to Coalition. Command, tell them the humans are back. Far away on the planet Kepler 442b, archaeologist Jiwoo was having the worst day of her career. She had been excavating pre-Coalition ruins for 6 months, hoping to find artifacts that would help her understand ancient galactic history. Instead, she had found something that could destroy everything she believed about the modern galaxy. The chamber was deep underground, hidden beneath layers of rock and metal. The walls were covered with images and text in dozens of different languages. But it was the human writing that caught her attention. Jiwoo was a helix, a crystalline being, whose people were known for their perfect memory and attention to detail. She had studied ancient human texts as part of her education, though most scholars considered it a waste of time. Now she was grateful for that knowledge. The human text told a story that made her crystalline structure vibrate with horror. It spoke of systematic extermination, of hunting parties that tracked human refugees across the galaxy, of Coalition leaders who had ordered the destruction of entire human colonies, including the children. The official history book said that humans had been relocated to preserve galactic peace. They said that humans had been given new worlds to settle, away from other species. They said it had been a humanitarian effort. The evidence on these walls told a different story. It told of genocide. Jiwoo activated her recording equipment and began documenting everything. Each symbol, each image, each terrible truth. As she worked, she found herself thinking about her own people. The Helix had been part of the Coalition for as long as anyone could remember. They prided themselves on being peaceful and civilized, but according to these records, her ancestors had helped hunt humans across the galaxy. They had used their perfect memory to track human refugees. They had been part of the machine that had tried to wipe out an entire species. Impossible, Jiwoo whispered to herself. But the evidence was right there on the walls, names, dates, locations, all recorded by someone who had been there, someone who had seen it happen. She found recordings too, ancient data crystals that still held images and sounds from 500,000 years ago. She activated one and immediately wished she had not. The crystal showed a human settlement on a distant world, families living in simple homes, children playing in gardens. It looked peaceful, normal. Then the coalition ships arrived. What followed was not a relocation. It was a slaughter. Ji-woo watched in horror as coalition forces systematically destroyed the settlement. They killed everyone, even the children. The humans tried to surrender, but the coalition forces ignored their pleas. The recording ended with smoke rising from burning homes and bodies scattered in the streets. Ji-woo turned off the crystal and sat in the darkness for a long time. Everything she had been taught about galactic history was a lie. The coalition had not saved the galaxy from violent humans. Admiral Hyun-soo stood in the observation deck of the Indomitable and watched the galaxy grow larger through the transparent metal walls. After 500,000 years in the dark void between galaxies, they were finally going home. But home was not the word most humans used anymore. Home was the place that had tried to kill them. Home was the galaxy that had hunted their children across the stars. Home was the enemy. The Indomitable was not like the ships that had fled the galaxy so long ago. Those had been desperate vessels, overcrowded and breaking down, carrying refugees who had nothing left but hope. This ship was a weapon. Every line of its hull had been designed for war. Every system had been built to bring death to their enemies. Hyun-soo was old, even by human standards. He had lived for over 3,000 years. His body kept young by technologies that the coalition could not even imagine. He remembered the stories passed down from the first refugees, stories of burning worlds and murdered families, stories that had shaped 500 millennia of human development. "Admiral," a voice said behind him. Hyun-soo turned to see Captain Woo Jin approaching. Like all humans of their generation, Woo Jin looked young but had eyes that held centuries of experience. "The fleet is in position," Woo Jin reported. "All ships ready to enter coalition space on your command." Hyun-soo nodded and looked back at the galaxy. From this distance, it looked beautiful. Billions of stars spinning in perfect harmony. It was hard to believe that such beauty could hide such cruelty. "How many ships do we have?" Hyun-soo asked, though he already knew the answer. 2 million combat vessels, Woo Jin replied. "Another 5 million support ships, and the construction fleets are building more every day. 2 million ships, more than the entire coalition fleet, each one more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. It had taken 500,000 years, but humanity was ready to return home." "Any word from the other fleets?" Fleet Admiral Daemin reports that the second fleet is in position on the galactic rim. Admiral Jin A's third fleet is moving into the outer spiral arm. We have them surrounded. Hyun-soo smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Humans had learned patience in the void. They had learned to plan for the long term. While the coalition had grown fat and comfortable in their stolen peace, humanity had been preparing for this day. "And the reconnaissance reports?" "Our scouts have been observing coalition space for the past 50 years, Woo Jin said. "Their technology has barely advanced since we left. Their military is designed for peacekeeping, not real war. They have forgotten how to fight." This was what Hyun-soo had hoped to hear, but it did not make him feel better. In some ways, he would have preferred if the coalition had become stronger, if they had at least tried to improve themselves, but they had not. They had simply enjoyed the fruits of their genocide and grown lazy. What about their defenses? Minimal. A few patrol fleets scattered across the galaxy, some defensive platforms around major worlds. Nothing that could stop us. Hyun-soo walked to the tactical display at the center of the observation deck. It showed the entire galaxy, with human fleets marked in blue and coalition forces in red. There was far more blue than red. "Sir," Woo Jin continued, "the crews are asking about our rules of engagement. How far are we authorized to go?" This was the question Hyun-soo had been dreading. For 500,000 years, humans had dreamed of this moment. They had planned for it, trained for it, built their entire civilization around preparing for it. But now that it was here, He had to decide what kind of justice they would bring. "We are not the monsters they tried to make us," Hyun-Soo said finally. "We will follow the protocols of return." The protocols of return were the laws that governed humanity's vengeance. They had been written by the survivors of the genocide, refined over millennia of debate and discussion. They were harsh but fair. They called for justice, not extinction. "Military, targets first," Hyun-Soo continued. "Then infrastructure. Civilian populations are to be relocated, not eliminated. We will not become what they were." Woo Jin nodded, but Hyun-Soo could see the disappointment in his eyes. Like many humans, Woo Jin had wanted total war, total destruction, an eye for an eye until the galaxy burned. "I know what you're thinking," Hyun-Soo said. "You think I'm being too merciful. It's not my place to question your orders, Admiral. But you do question them, and you should. That's what makes us different from them. We still question. We still doubt. We still feel mercy even for our enemies." Hyun-Soo turned back to the galaxy display. "Do you know what the first refugees called this place? They called it the Garden of Bones, because that's what it had become for us. A beautiful place filled with the bones of our people." He pointed to a section of the display where Earth's solar system was located. "They killed 12 billion humans on Earth alone, shot them down as they tried to evacuate, burned the bodies to make sure nothing would survive." The display shifted to show other systems. Red dots appeared, marking locations across the galaxy. Kepler 442b, 3 billion humans. Alpha Centauri, 8 billion. Proxima Station, 500 million. They hunted us from world to world, system to system, until there was nowhere left to run except the void. Woo Jin was quiet now. Like all humans, he knew the numbers. They had been drilled into every child for 500,000 years. 57 billion dead, an entire species nearly wiped from existence. "But we survived," Hyun-Soo continued. "We survived because we were stronger than they thought. We survived because we adapted, and we survived because we never forgot." The display changed again, now showing the human fleets hidden throughout the galaxy. Thousands of ships in every sector, all invisible to coalition sensors. "They think we're primitives," Hyun-Soo said. "They think we're the same violent species they remember from 500,000 years ago. They have no idea what we've become." This was true. Humanity had changed in the void. They had been forced to adapt to survive in the dark space between galaxies, where resources were scarce and every mistake could mean extinction. They had developed technologies that bent the laws of physics. They had learned to live for thousands of years. They had become something new. But they had also kept the best parts of what they had been: their creativity, their determination, their ability to work together when facing a common enemy, and their sense of justice. "Sir," a communication officer called out. "We're receiving reports from Scout Fleet 7. They've made contact with a coalition patrol." Hyun-Soo and Woo Jin moved to the communication station. On the screen, they could see the report from Commander So-young, who was leading the diplomatic mission. The coalition vessel was patrolling the Sol system, So-young reported. "A Vraxian battleship. I delivered the standard warning and they retreated. But they will report our presence to their command structure." "How did they react?" Hyun-Soo asked. "Confused. Frightened. They claimed that humans were extinct. When I corrected them, they seemed to go into shock." Hyun-Soo nodded. This was expected. The coalition had believed their own lies for so long that the truth would be difficult for them to accept. "What are your orders, Admiral?" So-young asked. "Begin Phase 1 of the return protocol," Hyun-Soo replied. "Deploy observation fleets to all major coalition worlds. I want eyes on every government center, every military base, every population hub. But no aggressive action yet." "Understood, sir. What about diplomatic contact?" "Not yet. Let them discover us gradually. Let them realize the scope of what they're facing. Fear will make them more reasonable when the time comes for negotiation." The communication ended and Hyun-Soo returned to the observation deck. The galaxy looked the same as it had a few minutes ago, but everything had changed. Humanity had announced its return. There would be no going back now. Admiral, Wu Jin said quietly, "Do you really think they'll negotiate? After what they did to us?" Hyunsu was quiet for a long moment. "I hope so, Captain, because if they don't, we'll have to do to them what they tried to do to us. And I'm not sure what that would make us." In another part of the fleet, Dr. Daun was reviewing the genetic records of the first human refugees. As the fleet's chief scientist, it was her job to understand how humanity had changed during their long exile in the void. The changes were remarkable. Humans now lived 10 times longer than their ancestors. They were stronger, smarter, and more resilient. They could survive in environments that would have killed their predecessors. But most importantly, they had developed something that the coalition races lacked: unity. 500,000 years of shared hardship had forged humanity into something new. They had no internal conflicts, no competing nations or factions. Every human was part of the same family, united by their common history and their shared goal of return. Da-Yun pulled up the cultural files. These were the records of human development during the exile: art, music, literature, philosophy. All of it shaped by their experience in the void. All of it focused on the dream of return. Human children were raised on stories of the lost worlds. They learned the names of every human settlement that had been destroyed. They memorized the faces of the coalition leaders who had ordered the genocide. They grew up knowing that they were the children of the void, born to reclaim what had been taken from their ancestors. It was a culture built on memory and justice, every human. Ambassador So Young walked through the corridors of Harmony Point Station with measured steps. The diplomatic station was supposed to be neutral ground, where all species of the coalition could meet in peace. Today, it would become the place where the galaxy learned that the dead could return. Behind her walked 2 human guards. They looked young and ordinary, but So Young knew that each of them could destroy this entire station with their bare hands if necessary. Human genetic engineering had come a long way in 500,000 years. The station's design was typical coalition architecture. Clean lines, soft lighting, everything designed to promote calm and peaceful discussion. It had been built by species that had forgotten what war looked like. Today they would remember. As So Young entered the main conference chamber, she saw them waiting for her, the 3 most powerful beings in the coalition. They sat at their respective positions around the circular table, each representing their species' interests. Zephi of the Helix Crystalline Collective sat perfectly still, his crystal body refracting the room's light into rainbow patterns. The Helix prided themselves on logic and reason. They believed that all problems could be solved through rational discussion. Mistwalker 7 of the Nathori gas-based species floated in his containment field, his misty form shifting and swirling with nervous energy. The Nathori were the most ancient species in the coalition, and they considered themselves the wisest. Prime Node 001 of the Karathi cybernetic race sat motionless, his mechanical body humming quietly with electronic activity. The Karathi had replaced their biological forms with machines long ago, believing that flesh was weakness. Ambassador So Young, Zephi spoke first, his voice creating harmonic tones that resonated through his crystal structure. "We welcome you to these negotiations, though we must express our confusion at your people's claims." So Young took her seat across from them. The chair had been designed for average coalition physiology, but it worked well enough for her modified human form. "There is no confusion to address," she replied in perfect coalition standard. "We are humans. We have returned to reclaim what was taken from us." "Impossible," Mistwalker 7's voice came from speakers around his containment field. "Humans became extinct 500,000 years ago. Our records are clear on this matter." So Young activated a holographic display above the table. It showed images from the human archives, burning worlds, fleeing refugees, the systematic destruction of human civilization. "Your records are lies," she said calmly. "You did not relocate us. You did not offer us new worlds. You hunted us across the galaxy like animals and tried to murder every last one of us." Prime Node 001's mechanical voice was emotionless. Even if these claims were accurate, which our databases do not support, the events occurred 500,000 years ago. No individuals from that time period remain alive. You're wrong about that, So Young smiled. I was there. The three coalition leaders exchanged glances. So Young looked like a young human female, perhaps 30 years old in the old human measurement system. It was impossible for her to have lived for 500,000 years. You are either mistaken or lying, HFY said. So Young activated another display. This one showed her own genetic record, dating back 500 millennia. It showed her birth on a human colony world, her childhood during the early years of the genocide, her escape into the void as a teenager. I have lived for 500,247 years, she said. I remember watching your fleets burn my home world. I remember my parents being shot down as they tried to evacuate. I remember everything. The revelation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The coalition leaders had based their entire civilization on the belief that they were the peaceful inheritors of a violent galaxy. The idea that their victims might still be alive challenged everything they understood about their own history. Even, if this is true, Mistwalker 7 said, what do you want from us? The past cannot be changed. Justice can still be served, So Young replied. We want reparations for the genocide of our people. We want acknowledgement of the crimes committed against us, and we want those responsible to face consequences. Those responsible are long dead, Prime Node 001 stated. Their societies live on. Their governments continue to exist. Their people still benefit from the worlds that were stolen from us. So Young's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath her words. Every coalition world was built on the bones of human children. What specific reparations are you demanding? HFY asked. So Young activated a final display. It showed a detailed breakdown of human losses during the genocide. Worlds, populations, resources, everything that had been taken from humanity. 57. Systems to be returned to human control. Payment of resource credits equivalent to 500,000 years of development. Formal acknowledgement of genocide by all coalition governments. And trials for war crimes. The three leaders stared at the display in shock. What So Young was demanding was essentially the dissolution of the coalition itself. Those 57 systems included some of the most developed and populated worlds in the galaxy. This is impossible, HFY said. You are demanding that we destroy our own civilization to pay for crimes we did not commit. You didn't commit the crimes, So Young agreed. But you benefited from them. Every coalition citizen lives in comfort because my people died. Every coalition world exists because our worlds were destroyed. You are the inheritors of genocide. We cannot agree to these demands, Mistwalker 7 stated. Then you are refusing to negotiate in good faith, So Young said. That is unfortunate but not unexpected. She stood up from her chair. I have been authorized to make you a counteroffer. Unconditional surrender. Accept human authority over the galaxy, and your species will be allowed to continue existing under our protection. The three coalition leaders reacted with shock and outrage. You cannot be serious, Prime Node 001 said. Completely serious, So Young replied. You tried to commit genocide against us. We survived. Now we are strong enough to do the same to you. The only question is whether we will choose mercy or justice. You are threatening the entire galaxy with war, HFY accused. No, So Young corrected. You already declared war on us 500,000 years ago. We are simply responding to your original declaration. She moved toward the chamber's viewing port and looked out at the stars. Do you see that star cluster? There? The Proxima region? The coalition leaders looked where she was pointing. They could see a small group of stars about 50 light years from the station. That region contains 12 inhabited coalition worlds. About 40 billion people. In total. So Young tapped a control on her wrist. The stars in the Proxima region suddenly went dark. What did you do? Mistwalker 7 demanded. I demonstrated the difference between our civilizations, So Young replied calmly. Those stars are still there. Those worlds are still there. Those 40 billion people are still alive, but they no longer have faster-than-light travel. They no longer have interstellar communication. They are completely isolated from the rest of the galaxy. She turned, back to face the coalition leaders. This was accomplished by 12 human ships using our most basic technology. We could have destroyed those worlds entirely, but we chose not to. That is the difference between us. You chose genocide, we choose isolation. You're holding 40 billion people hostage, HFY said. No, I'm protecting them from the choices their leaders might make, So Young replied. If you choose to fight us, they won't be caught in the crossfire. They'll simply wait in isolation until the war is over. Prime Node, Suero 1's mechanical form, was processing vast amounts of data, trying to understand how the humans had accomplished such a feat. What technology did you use? Our sensors detected no weapons fire. We call them reality anchors, So Young explained. They alter the fundamental constants of physics in a localized area. Faster than light travel becomes impossible. Subspace communication fails. Even your most advanced computers stop working properly. She walked back to the table and sat down. We have deployed over 10,000 reality anchors throughout Coalition space. Every major world is now isolated. Every fleet is cut off from command. Your entire civilization has been reduced to individual planets with no way to coordinate. A response. The implications hit the Coalition leaders like a physical blow. Their entire society was based on interstellar cooperation. Without faster-than-light travel and communication, the Coalition would collapse within months. This is an act of war, Mistwalker 7 said. No, this is a demonstration, So Young corrected. An act of war would be if we destroyed your worlds, instead of isolating them. An act of war would be if we killed your people instead of protecting them from their own government's poor decisions. What do you want from us? HFY asked. I want you to understand your situation, So Young replied. You are facing a species that you tried to exterminate. A species that survived by becoming stronger than you ever imagined possible. A species that has spent 500,000 years planning for this moment. She activated the holographic display. Again. This time it showed the location of human fleets throughout the galaxy. There were thousands of them surrounding every Coalition stronghold. We have more ships than your entire navy. Our technology is centuries ahead of yours. The war began at exactly 800 Coalition Standard Time across 17 sectors simultaneously. General Minho watched from the bridge of the assault ship Retribution as the first phase of humanity's reckoning unfolded across his tactical displays. It was not the kind of war the Coalition expected. There were no massive fleet battles, no prolonged sieges of fortified worlds. Instead, human forces struck with surgical precision at the foundations of Coalition civilization itself. On the crystal world of Helixia Prime, the main Helix Collective experienced something they had never felt before: silence. Their crystalline communication networks, which had functioned perfectly for millions of years, suddenly went dead. The harmonic frequencies that allowed crystal beings to share thoughts and memories were being dampened by human sonic weapons. Status report on Helixia Prime, Minho called to his tactical officer. Lieutenant Sang Ho consulted his displays. Harmonic dampening is complete, sir. The Helix Collective has been reduced to individual crystal beings with no way to coordinate. Their government has essentially ceased to exist, Minho nodded. The Helix were dangerous as a collective, their shared consciousness allowing them to process information and make decisions at incredible speed. As individuals, they were confused and frightened creatures who had never learned to think for themselves. What about the Nathori colonies? Atmospheric conversion proceeding as planned, Sang Ho reported. We're introducing compounds that are harmless to other species but toxic to gas-based life forms. The Nathori are being forced to evacuate to sealed habitats. This was the beauty of humanity's strategy. They were not destroying their enemies. They were making it impossible for them to function as a civilization. The Nathori depended on their ability to exist in open atmospheric environments. Trapped in sealed containers, they became prisoners in their own worlds. And the Karathi? Network viruses have been deployed across all Karathi systems. Their cybernetic infrastructure is experiencing cascade failures. Most Karathi units have been forced to shut down to prevent permanent damage. Minho allowed himself a grim smile. The Karathi had replaced their biological bodies with machines, believing that this made them immortal. They had not considered that machines could be infected and destroyed by other machines. Human computer viruses, developed over 500,000 years of isolation, were far beyond anything the Karathi could defend against. Casualty reports? Minimal, sir. Less than 1,000 coalition military personnel killed across all operations. Civilian casualties are near zero. This was important to Minho. The protocols of return required that human forces minimize unnecessary death. They were here to seek justice, not to become the same kind of monsters that had tried to destroy them. Sir, the communication officer called out, we're receiving surrender offers from 12 coalition systems. Too early, Minho replied. They need to understand the full scope of their situation before they can make informed decisions about surrender. On his display, Minho could see the second phase of operations beginning. Human engineering teams were moving throughout coalition space, targeting the infrastructure that held their civilization together. On the industrial world of Mechanus, massive factories that had produced goods for the coalition for thousands of years suddenly found their assembly lines reconfiguring themselves. Human nanobots, invisible to coalition sensors, were reprogramming the automated systems to produce useless junk instead of vital equipment. On the agricultural world of Verdania, the weather control systems that maintained perfect growing conditions for coalition food crops were being subtly altered. The changes were small enough to avoid immediate detection, but over time they would render the planet incapable of feeding the coalition's population. On the transportation hub of Nexus Station, the massive computers that coordinated shipping routes throughout the galaxy were being infected with logic viruses that would gradually degrade their ability to function. Within months, the coalition's interstellar trade network would collapse. Sir, Sang-Ho reported, Engineer Ye-Jin is requesting permission to deploy the reality anchors around the coalition capital worlds. Minho considered this. The reality anchors were humanity's most devastating weapon, capable of isolating entire star systems by making faster-than-light travel impossible. Once deployed, they would trap coalition governments on their homeworlds with no way to coordinate. A defense. Approved, he said. Begin deployment of anchors around all Class A coalition worlds. Across the galaxy, human ships moved into position around the coalition's most important planets. The ships themselves were invisible to coalition sensors, using technology that bent light and energy around their hulls. But their reality anchors were very real. Engineer Ye-Jin monitored the deployment from her position aboard the technical vessel Inevitable. Each reality anchor was a masterpiece of human engineering, a device that could alter the fundamental laws of physics in a localized area. Anchor deployment successful around Helix Prime, her assistant reported. The planet is now completely isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Confirmed, Ye-Jin replied. Mark it as secured. One by one, the coalition's capital worlds found themselves cut off from their empires. Without faster-than-light communication, they could not coordinate with their colonies. Without faster-than-light travel, they could not move fleets or supplies. Each world became an isolated island in space, but the coalition military was not surrendering without a fight. Admiral Kex Vor of the Combined Fleet had managed to gather over 3,000 ships at the strategic system of Gateway Point, hoping to mount a counterattack against the human forces. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we have human contacts on sensors. 3 ships bearing directly toward us. Kexvor looked at the display in disbelief. 3 ships against 3,000? Either the humans were suicidal, or they had some kind of advantage that his forces didn't understand. Open a channel to the human vessels, he ordered. The response came immediately. This is Captain Wu Jin of the human vessel Inexorable. You are ordered to stand down and surrender your forces. I have 3,000 ships, Kexvor replied. You have 3. Your mathematics are poor. Admiral, you are thinking in terms of your technology and your capabilities. You are not thinking in terms of ours. On the display, HFY watched as the three human ships moved into an attack formation. They were sleek and dark, their hulls covered with the angular symbols that seemed to be carved rather than painted. "This is your final warning, Captain," Wu Jin said. "Surrender now or face the consequences. All ships, weapons hot," HFY ordered. "Target the human vessels and fire at will." 3,000 coalition ships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams, particle weapons, and missile barrages converged on the three human ships. The display lit up with explosions and energy discharges. When the light faded, the three human ships were still there, completely undamaged. "Impossible," HFY whispered. "Your weapons are based on technology that we mastered 500,000 years ago." Captain Wu Jin explained calmly. "Our defenses were specifically designed to counter them." The three human ships began to glow with a strange blue light. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was painful to look at. "What you are about to witness is the difference between a species that grew comfortable and a species that was forced to evolve," Wu Jin continued. The blue light suddenly expanded outward from the human ships. As it passed through the coalition fleet, something impossible happened. The ships began to simply disappear, not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased from existence, as if they had never been there at all. In less than 30 seconds, 3,000 coalition vessels had been reduced to empty space. "Admiral HFY," Captain Wu Jin called out, "your ship has been spared so that you can carry a message to any remaining coalition forces. Resistance is futile. We are no longer the primitive species you remember. We have become something you cannot fight." HFY looked around his bridge. His entire fleet was gone. His officers stared at their displays in shock and horror. 3 ships had just destroyed the largest military force the coalition had assembled in centuries. What do you want from us?" HFY asked. "Justice," Wu Jin replied. "And we will have it one way or another." Meanwhile, on the research station Deep Thought, archaeologist Ji Wu was making her way through the chaos of an evacuation. Her discovery of evidence proving the Coalition's genocide of humanity had made her a target for Coalition security forces who wanted to suppress the information. But now, with human forces systematically dismantling Coalition civilization, the truth was becoming impossible to hide. Across the galaxy, Coalition citizens were learning that their entire society had been built on a lie. "Dr. Ji Wu," a voice called behind her. She turned to see Commander Tai Ho, the Vraxian officer who had first encountered the human fleet. "Commander," she said, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I've been relieved of command," Tai Ho explained. "Coalition command believes I should have fought the humans instead of retreating." "You made the right choice," Ji Wu told him. "Fighting them would have been suicide." "I'm beginning to understand that." Tai Ho looked around at the evacuating research station. "Dr. Ji Wu, I've been thinking about what the humans said to me, about how we benefited from—" Emperor Donghyun stood in the center of the Grand Assembly Hall on Mars, looking out at the representatives of 1,000 worlds. 6 months had passed since the Coalition's surrender, and the galaxy was learning to live under human authority. The Maor Hall itself was a symbol of humanity's new approach to governance. Instead of the sterile perfection of Coalition architecture, it was built with warm wood and stone, materials that reminded everyone of the organic worlds where life began. The humans wanted their subjects to remember that they were dealing with a species that valued life and growth, not cold efficiency. "The Terran Empire recognizes the delegate from New Karathi," Donghyun announced. A figure rose from the section reserved for cybernetic beings. This was Repair Node 7743, formerly a minor maintenance unit in the old Karathi hierarchy. The human conquest had shattered the rigid caste system of Karathi society, and now even former servants could speak for their people. "Honored Emperor," Repair Node 7743 said, "My people request permission to reactivate our core networks. Without central coordination, our society is breaking down." Donghyun nodded thoughtfully. The Karathi had learned to live as a collective cybernetic consciousness, and the human computer viruses had forced them to shut down their networks to prevent complete system collapse. But isolation was slowly driving them insane. "The request is granted," Donghyun replied, "with the following conditions. All network traffic will be monitored by human AI systems. Any attempt to coordinate resistance activities will result in permanent network shutdown, and 10% of your processing power will be dedicated to supporting human administrative functions." "We accept these terms," Repair Node 7743 said quickly. This was how the new galactic order worked. The conquered species were not enslaved or exterminated. They were managed. Human administrators worked with local leaders to maintain stability, while ensuring that no coalition species could ever again pose a threat to galactic peace. Dr. Nei Young, the human director of cultural preservation, stepped forward to address the assembly. She was one of the younger humans, only 2,000 years old, and she represented the more optimistic faction that believed in eventual reconciliation. "The Terran Empire wishes to announce the establishment of the Galactic Heritage Project," she said. "We will be documenting and preserving the cultures, histories, and traditions of all species in the galaxy. This includes full records of coalition civilization before the conquest." This announcement caused a stir in the assembly. Many coalition representatives had expected their cultures to be suppressed or destroyed. The fact that humans were actively working to preserve them was surprising. "Why?" asked Crystal Singer Ythmore from the Helix section. The crystal being's voice carried harmonics of confusion and suspicion. "Because diversity makes us stronger," Nayang replied. "Humanity spent 500,000 years in isolation, and we learned that a single perspective, no matter how advanced, has limitations. We want to learn from your cultures, even as we govern them." This was the paradox of human rule. They were conquerors, but they were also protectors. They had destroyed the coalition military, but they were working to preserve coalition culture. They ruled with absolute authority, but they listened to their subjects. In the section reserved for individual delegates, Tae-ho sat quietly. The former Vraxian commander had become something unique in the new galactic order, a coalition citizen working directly for human administration. He served as a cultural liaison, helping human governors understand the species they now ruled. "The delegate from the Vraxian sectors has a question," Donghyun announced. Tae-ho rose slowly. "Honored Emperor, my people are struggling to understand their place in the new order. We were warriors once. Now we are forbidden from carrying weapons or maintaining military forces. What are we supposed to become?" It was a question that many coalition species were asking. Their entire identities had been built around their roles in the old galactic order. The Vraxians had been warriors. The Helix had been philosophers and administrators. The Nethori had been traders and explorers. Now all of those roles were controlled by humans. "You become what you choose to become," Donghyun replied. "The old coalition limited your species to narrow roles based on biological characteristics. We are offering you the freedom to explore new possibilities." He activated a holographic display showing various human colonies throughout the galaxy. On Kepler 438b, Vraxian artists are creating new forms of sculpture that combine your species' natural agility with human aesthetic principles. On Gliese 667c, Helix philosophers are working with human scientists to develop new theories about consciousness and reality. On Wolf 1061c, Nethori explorers are mapping the deep void regions that even human ships cannot easily reach. The display shifted to show integrated communities where humans and coalition species lived and worked together. It was still rare, but it was happening. The children of former enemies were learning to coexist. "The old coalition told you that each species had one purpose," Donghyun continued. "We believe that every individual, regardless of species, has unlimited potential. The question is not what you were, but what you want to become." In the back of the assembly hall, Jiwoo watched the proceedings with mixed feelings. As the director of historical truth, she was responsible for ensuring that the real history of the galaxy was taught to future generations. It was a difficult job because the truth was often painful for everyone involved. She had spent the past 6 months traveling throughout former coalition space, documenting the evidence of humanity's genocide and the lies that had been told to cover it up. The work was necessary, but it was also heartbreaking. She had met many coalition citizens who genuinely believed they had been living in a peaceful, just society. Learning the truth about their history had shattered their worldview. But there were positive developments too. Young coalition citizens who learned the true history often became the strongest advocates for the new human order. They understood that their species bore responsibility for terrible crimes, and they wanted to make amends. The Assembly will now hear from the Reconciliation Committee, Dong-hyun announced. A mixed group of humans and coalition citizens approached the central podium. This was one of the most important developments of the past 6 months. The formation of integrated committees where former enemies worked together on shared problems. The committee's spokesperson was Ambassador So Young, the same human who had delivered the ultimatum to the coalition 6 months earlier. But standing beside her was HFY, the former Helix leader who had refused to accept human demands. Honored Emperor, So Young said, the Reconciliation Committee has completed its preliminary report on war crimes and reparations. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The question of justice had been the driving force behind humanity's return to the galaxy. How that justice would be administered would determine the future of billions of beings. The committee has identified 2,847 individuals who were directly involved in planning or executing the genocide against humanity, So Young continued. Of these, 12 are still alive. A murmur ran through the assembly. After 500,000 years, it was remarkable that anyone from the original genocide was still living. The committee recommends that these individuals be tried in human courts for crimes against sapient life, So Young said. However, we also recommend that the sentences focus on restorative rather than punitive justice. HFY stepped forward to speak. His crystal form no longer glowed with the confident light of someone who believed himself to be always right. The past 6 months had taught him humility. I have spent the past months reviewing the evidence of my people's crimes, he said. The Helix Collective participated in the hunting and killing of human civilians, including children. We used our perfect memory to track human refugees so they could be destroyed. His harmonic voice carried tones of genuine remorse. We told ourselves we were serving the greater good. We believed that humans were a threat to galactic peace. But the truth is that we were afraid. Afraid of a species that was different from us, that challenged our assumptions about how intelligent beings should behave. The committee recommends that species-wide reparations take the form of service rather than punishment, So Young continued. Helix perfect memory will be used to help preserve human historical records. Karathi computational power will support human scientific research. Vraxian physical capabilities will assist in building new human colonies. This was the genius of the human approach to justice. Instead of destroying their former enemies, they were transforming them into partners. The very abilities that had been used to hunt humans were now being redirected to serve human interests. What about the worlds that were taken from us? Asked Captain Wu Jin from the human section. 57 worlds will be returned to full human control, Dong-hyun replied. Coalition populations on these worlds will be relocated to other planets with full support for the transition. But we will not simply abandon these worlds to return to their pre-genocide state. He activated another display showing the 57 worlds that had once been human colonies. They were now integrated into a new kind of civilization, one that combined human leadership with the best elements of coalition culture. These worlds will become